Monday night, anatomy, back muscles, night class.
I urge you to do just that. Experience and compare on many different people. Exploring one deltoid muscle, nice job. 100 deltoids, well, now you're really talking. So what we've given you here is an introduction, and we'll focus on 5 aspects of the major muscles of the body. First, how to position your partner and have the muscle engage or contract.
Your client.
Second, the key bony landmarks that isolate the muscle and its attachment sites. Third, how to palpate it, get your hands on it, and feel its texture and fiber direction. Fourth, how to differentiate the muscle from surrounding muscles and structures. And fifth, how to shorten and lengthen the muscle. So before we begin, how about a few palpation tips? First of all, allow your hands and fingers to be soft and responsive. Secondly, as you begin exploring, you may periodically want to close your eyes just to enhance your awareness. Smaller structures can be best accessed with a fingertip or two, whereas larger structures are best accessed with your whole hand. As you begin exploring the body, you may find that structures don't come into your fingers as readily as you might like. And a common response is to start pressing harder and deeper into the body. Well, instead of pressing into the tissue, try inviting the tissues into your hands. Gentle contact will allow your fingers to be receptive, whereas excessive pressure just numbs out the digits and makes for a generally uncomfortable experience for your partner. Ow! You may also consider first locating a structure on your own body before palpating it on your partner. Now here's an important one. Have patience with your learning process. Look, just because you've had a trapezius muscle your entire life doesn't mean you're going to be able to instantly locate it and explore it on your partner. Now, it's okay if you get lost, make a wrong turn on the body. Chances are you're very close to what you're looking for. Last but not least, when in doubt, ask the body. When you begin palpating, you may be a little confused or overwhelmed about the structures you're trying to find, but when in doubt, go ahead and ask the body that you're trying to access. For example, I could ask the question, what tendon is this that I see right here on the top of the foot? Well, that leads to the question, where does it go to and from? So if I follow it, it seems to lead here to the hallucis, or big toe. And if I follow it the opposite direction, it seems to pass along the top of the foot and then disappear here at the top of the ankle. Okay, well, what if I ask my partner to flex his toes? Go ahead and curl your toes under. Does that do anything? Not really. And if you go ahead and extend your toes, go the other way, well, wow, now the tendon really becomes taut and very visible, and I've just deduced, just by asking those questions, that tendon is the tendon of the extensor hallucis longus muscle. That's the long muscle that extends the hallucis, or big toe. So always remember that you're never alone. The body is just waiting to help you.
It is, right? Make sense? Say no and I'll stop. I'll bet. You don't. All right. Oh, it stopped for me. Right? Right? An extensor, we know it's extending the big toe, the hallucis. Hallucis is the thumb is not hallucis. Right?
I didn't get that far.
Oh, okay. Yeah, right. We're dealing with the trunk. Hello. Okay. Well, it's all connected, folks. All right. Let's move on. We did, okay. So we did the spine and thorax, but I don't know that we did. Let's look at the shoulder and the. Did we finish the spine and
I
thorax?
don't think so.
All right, then let's see.
We were kind of jumping around.
Whoops. Yeah. All right, let's look at it. Let's see what we got. We just did the erector spinae group. I thought we did.
We did not do the multifidi
All right. Why don't we take it from?
or the quadrus lumbritum. We didn't do that.
You want to take it from the top, and then we'll move on to the neck and the shoulder. Now, we're not going to do the arm, but there are connections here for the shoulder girdle that we've got to know about in terms of.
Why don't we just start from the top to the bottom?
That's what I'm saying. Let's start with the.
Please.
Oh, you mean starting with the neck?
Yeah, like the top of the body to No? Is that too tough?
Let's see. So what you're suggesting is, hang on.
Well, what do you think is best?
Yeah. Head?
See, I'm not bothering with the face and the head yet.
Why?
Because it's not on the midterm, that's why.
Okay.
So what's on the midterm? Yeah, what's on the
The
midterm?
back? Did you mention that the back was what you wanted me to work on?
Yeah, the trunk, right. The trunk muscles, the back, and there's some obviously there's combination here, so we do the spine and the thorax, and then we need to know, to a certain extent, the neck muscles. I'll have to see what she's got in mind for the test, and then if I have to, I'll back and fill, because the shoulder and the arm is going to involve the scapular stabilizer muscles, right? So we're going to use some of this as well as the spine and thorax. Let's take this from the top. So it'll be, you've seen it, it'll be a good review. Again, we're looking at origins, insertions, actions, and to a certain extent, innervation. That is to say, what nerves innervate the muscles. Okay? Hello, wake up. Okay, let's see, play all, right? There we go. All right.
The erector spinae group runs from the sacrum to the occiput, along the posterior aspect of the vertebral column. The erector spinae muscles are like a tall poplar tree with three main branches. In this case, the spinalis, longissimus, and iliocostalis. The spinalis is the smallest of the three muscles and lies closest to the spine in the lamina groove. The thick longissimus and lateral iliocostalis form a visible mound along the lumbar and thoracic spine. The long tendons of iliocostalis extend laterally beneath the scapula. So the erector spinae, those broad muscles that run right up the entire spine. Let's see if we can find them. I'm going to begin by asking my partner to just raise his feet a little bit. That's fabulous, right there. Now, the erectors don't obviously raise the feet, but they stabilize the pelvis when I ask him to do this action, and there we can see a really fine example of the lower portion of the erector spinae engaging as he does that. And notice when I ask him to relax, they soften and seem to disappear. Now, to engage the upper fibers, I'll ask my partner to just sort of arch his back a little bit. There you go. And there we can see deep to those middle fibers of the trapezius, the upper portion of the erector spinae right there. Great. And go ahead and relax. And they seem to soften and disappear. Great. Now, there's probably only one key bony landmark or landmarks that's going to help really get your hands on the erectors. And that's going to be the spinous processes of the thoracic and lumbar vertebrae. They run, of course, right down the center of the spine. And I can just set my fingers on those like so. If there's any other landmarks, I'd have to say it would be the PSIs, the posterior superior iliac spines, where those dimples are often found in the low back. And then lastly, probably the surface of the sacrum right here, which is where a lot of the erectors attach onto, right onto that tissue, into the thoracolumbar aponeurosis. Good. So what I'm going to do is just set my fingers next to the spinous processes and see if I can work my fingers into those erectors. Now, since I know that they run up the spine, I know that the fiber direction is going to run this way. So I'm going to purposefully roll my fingers across the fibers and really get a sense of their fibers and their density. Really quite large here in the lumbar area. And as I progress superiorly, they become a little broader and a little more tendinous, sort of thinning out a little bit. Here I'm working underneath those lower fibers of the trapezius. Now there's three branches of the erector spinae. The most medial, closest to the spinous processes, will be the smaller branch of the three, which will be the spinalis, right in here, right in that lamina groove. And then if I take it a step further lateral, I'm going to roll across the longissimus fibers. And then the most lateral will be the iliocostalis right out here, which has those tendons that come here almost spreading right underneath the scapula. Great. And finally, let's just check to make sure we're on the muscles we think we're on. If I ask my partner to just raise his feet up a little bit, I want to see if these muscles engage, and they do. Great. Go ahead and relax. Do these fibers run vertically up the spine? Yes, they do. And if I move up into the thoracic area here, beneath the superficial trapezius and then the intermediate rhomboid fibers, deep to those, there I can feel the fibers of the erector spinae. And those are just all ways that you can check to make sure that you're really feeling the erectors down the entire back. The multifidi and rotatories are part of the transversospinalis muscle group. They are deep to the erector spinae muscle group and extend the length of the vertebral column. The surprisingly thick multifidi are directly accessible in the lumbar spine. They are the only muscles with fibers that lie across the posterior surface of the sacrum, and the shorter, smaller rotatories lie deep to the multifidi. So to palpate the multifidi and the rotatories, I'm going to first isolate the lamina groove. So the lamina groove is that space that's in between the spinous processes and the transverse processes of the lumbar and thoracic vertebrae. And there you can see the vertebrae and that trough that's on either side of the spinous processes. Those are the lamina grooves. And that's where we're going to find the multifidi and the rotatories deep to the erectors. So let's just begin by getting a sense of where those landmarks are. Well, the spinous processes are pretty easy to find. They're usually running right up the center of the back. And there I can just easily feel a series of points that are the spinous processes. Here we can feel the thoracic spinous processes. I can even just roll my fingers around them on either side. There's little spaces in between them. And then as we move into the lumbar area, I notice that they're a little further apart as the vertebrae are larger. And I can follow them all the way down here to that surface of the sacrum. So we've got the spinous processes, and then we've got the transverse processes that are quite a bit more difficult to locate because they're deep. And the distance between the transverse processes is going to change because in the lumbar area, obviously the vertebrae are larger, so the TVPs are further lateral. But as we ascend the spine, the TVPs get closer to the spinous processes as the vertebrae get smaller in size. So let's first locate the lumbar TVPs. I'm going to just locate the spinous processes here and then slide over those large erector spinae muscles and then just kind of come in through the side door here laterally and feel for the bony ridge that's formed by the TVPs of the lumbar right there. So I'm sort of going in that direction. And I'm in between the iliac crest and the 12th rib, and there's the TVPs right there. So I know that in that space is going to be the location of the rotatories and multifidi. So then I can follow that up, again not working through the erectors but just off to the side, and there we can continue to feel the TVPs as they lay next to the rib cage now, right there. So if I slide a little lateral, that's the surface of the ribs right there. But if I tuck in just a little bit here underneath and sort of going in the side door of the erectors, there's those TVPs of the thoracic vertebrae. And I can follow this all the way up here into that region between the scapula. So what we've done there is isolate where the lamina groove is, right in here. And now let's just take a moment to see those multifidi and rotatory. There they are as they sit right there in the lamina groove. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my fingers here, right in the thoracic area, and I'm just going to very slowly work my fingers through the erector fibers to get down to that level of the multifidi and the rotatories. Now, I might not feel specific bellies, but I'm definitely going to feel the density of this muscle tissue as it sits in the laminar groove, right in there. And if I work a little further inferior here, deep to the erectors, I'm going to really have to work my fingers in through those deep, thick erector fibers, but there, in that laminar groove, is the density and mass of those multifidi and rotatories. And finally, I can move all the way down to the surface of the sacrum here. I can work right through the sheet, and I can feel the muscle tissue that sits right on top of that. And that's got to be the multifidi, because it's the only muscle that's found on the surface of the sacrum. Right there.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
The 8 small suboccipitals are the deepest muscles of the upper posterior neck. To outline the suboccipital's location, find the superior nuchal line of the occiput, the transverse processes of C1, and the spinous process of C2. The upper fibers of the trapezius can also be used as a marker.
Now the external.
So when we say that the suboccipitals are the deepest muscles of the upper posterior neck, what exactly do we mean? Well, let's show you. First of all, if we look at the back of the neck, there we can see the most superficial muscle, and that's the trapezius. And then if we take that away, we can see the next layer, which is the splenius capitis. And then deep to that, we see the rather thick semispinalis capitis. And then finally, deepest of all, right there we see the suboccipitals. 8 little muscles tucked right in there at the base of the skull. Good. So now that we have an idea of generally where they're located, let's isolate some landmarks to really find their exact location. First, we've got the superior nuchal line of the occiput running right along here at the base of the head. Now, my partner's bald, which is convenient for me, but even if he had a big head of hair, I can locate it because it runs right across pretty much the top of the ear or the middle of the ear right here. And I can set my fingers right along that space, and there are those superior nuchal lines, one on this side, one on this side. And they sort of serve as the shoreline between the bones of the cranium and the muscles of the neck. And there we see a really nice example of the external occipital protuberance. Okay, so that's one landmark that's going to help us. Not because the suboccipitals attach here. They actually attach about 1.5 inches below. But that's a nice reference point to just start from. The second landmark is going to be the transverse processes of C1, which is located by finding the mastoid process here, and then just slipping my finger inferiorly and anteriorly a little bit. And using the broad finger pads, I'm going to just feel for deep bony knob right there. And right there, and here on the other side, is going to be the TVPs of C1, and that's going to be our second landmark to isolate the suboccipitals. And the last one will be the spinous process of C2. And there, I'm going to just set my finger pads here on the posterior neck. I'm probably about 2.5, 3 inches below the level of the external occipital protuberance. And right there is a subtle mound of the spinous process of C2. It's pretty easy to find since C1 doesn't have a spinous process. So we've got the spinous process of C2, the TVPs of C1, and there the superior nuchal lines. And all of those will serve as references for where we can find the suboccipitals. And again, we can see them right there. Okay, now if I wanted to get my hands on these muscles, instead of actually working my fingers through the trapezius and these deeper muscles here, I'm going to actually just ask my partner to raise his head slightly, and there I can find that edge of the trapezius right there, and relax. And I'm going to just set my fingers right there along the edge of the trapezius and work my fingers into this tissue. Now again, I don't feel any of the specific bellies of the suboccipitals, but as a mass, as a group, their mass and their density can definitely be felt right in there. And last but not least, I want to show you one thing that's interesting on my partner. Go ahead and just kind of tuck your chin a little bit. And here we have a great example of what runs in between the two sides of the suboccipitals and the other muscles of the neck, and that's the ligamentum nuchae, spanning from that external occipital protuberance down to the spinous process of C7. Just a really great example of that band of connective tissue that sort of spans right up the back of the neck. Good, go ahead and relax. So with that in mind, let's now turn our partner supine and see what we can find in that position. So with my partner in a supine position, there's a simple little maneuver I can do to access the suboccipitals. I'm going to just cradle the head with my hands, and I'm going to find that superior nuchal line either side of that external occipital protuberance, that big knob on the back of the head. And then I'm going to just slowly sink my fingers inferiorly down toward the suboccipitals. And as my fingers sort of descend into the back of the neck, sort of rounding and following the round surface of the cranium, there I'm going to just penetrate through those superficial muscle bellies, the trapezius and whatnot, and my fingers are going to find themselves sort of resting on the density of those suboccipitals. And that's just a little maneuver you can do to just let the weight of the head and the neck allow your fingers to sink right into these muscles.
You're right, maybe it's...
Although it would seem to be the deepest muscle of the low back, the quadratus lumborum is, strangely enough, the deepest muscle of the abdomen.
So where's major?
Stretching from the posterior ilium to the transverse processes of the lumbar vertebrae and 12th rib, this squat muscle is simply an abdominal muscle located on the posterior surface of the thorax.
That's the QL.
That's your QL.
So my partner's prone on the table, and I'm going to begin by isolating the three bony landmarks that really isolate the location of the quadratus lumborum. The first bony landmark is going to be the 12th rib, which is located at the very bottom of the rib cage, of course. And I can find the surface of the rib cage, and after a while my fingers sink into the flesh of the posterior abdomen, and at the very bottom, if I go back a little bit, the very bottom of the rib cage, there is his 12th rib. And I can follow it immediately to where it attaches here at the vertebrae. So first landmark is the 12th rib. Then we've got the posterior iliac crest. And there's his iliac crest, and I can follow it posteriorly to where it ends at the PSIS, that dimple of the low back. And then finally, the third bony landmark, or landmarks, will be the transverse processes of the lumbar vertebrae. So we know the spinous processes are here, and the transverse processes are going to be a good distance further lateral. So I'm going to set my fingers beyond the erector spinae
Don't get mad at me if I'm wrong.
and work my fingers at an angle, and there I can feel the bony ridge of the transverse processes. They're not like individual points, it's more like a ridge. Good. So now we've got the 12th rib, the posterior iliac crest, and the transverse processes. And in that space will be the quadratus lumborum. So let's check it. I'm going to just set my fingers into that space. I'm going to start laterally. And I'm going to ask my partner to go ahead and bring this hip toward this shoulder. Fabulous. In just a very small contraction, I can feel the QL contract. And go ahead and relax. Good. And now with the tissue relaxed, I can really get my finger into this space between the bottom of the rib cage and the top of the pelvis. Now, let's figure out where the erector spinae are in the midst of all this. Go ahead and raise your feet up slightly. Fabulous. And that action shows me where the erector spinae fibers are. And here's that lateral edge. And I know that there's the erectors, and the QL will be further lateral. Go ahead and relax. Good. And so I can avoid the erectors by getting right into this space for the quadratus lumborum. We can also access the quadratus lumborum in a side-lying position. I can find that posterior iliac crest, I can find the bottom of the rib cage, and I can set my thumbs right into that space between those landmarks and ask my partner to go ahead and hike your hip just a pinch. There, and there's that edge and contraction of the quadratus lumborum. The four abdominal muscles expand far beyond the stomach region. In fact, they form a muscular girdle that reaches around the sides of the thorax all the way to the thoracolumbar aponeurosis, and superiorly to the middle ribs, and inferiorly to the inguinal ligament. The revered washboard belly is formed by the multiple superficial bellies of the rectus abdominis. And lateral to the rectus abdominis is the external oblique. Unlike the round bellies of the rectus, the external oblique is a broad superficial muscle best palpated at its attachment to the lower ribs. The thin internal oblique fibers are deep and perpendicular to the external oblique fibers and can be difficult to distinguish. And lastly, the transverse abdominis, the deepest muscle of the group, plays a major role in forced exhalation and cannot be specifically palpated. So let's begin with the rectus abdominis, better known as the six-pack muscle, but in all reality, it's a 10-pack. So what I'm going to ask my partner to do is, just so we can see the muscle engaged, is go ahead and do a little bit of a crunch. So he's going to just flex his torso a little bit, and there we have a great example of the topography of that rectus abdominis here. And while he's just engaged, I'm just going to set my fingers here and really isolate those individual bellies that extend all the way from the rib cage down to that pubic crest. Great, go ahead and relax. So let's just take this to the next step and just isolate some of the landmarks that help really shape where the rectus abdominis is. The first I'm going to find is just that edge of the ribs right here. So above that is going to be this surface of the rib cage, surface of ribs 5, 6, and 7. There's his xiphoid process just at the bottom of the sternum. So on one end of the rectus, we've got this surface of the bottom portion of the rib cage, and down here we've got the pubic crest. Now, let's just stop here for a second. Chances are you've never palpated your own pubic crest, let alone your partner's, so let's all find it. You, me, and my partner. So first thing we're going to do is just go ahead and locate your navel or your umbilicus right here. And then just progressively work your fingers down inferiorly, and you'll feel flesh and flesh of the belly, and then there, about 6 or 8 inches down, just above the pubic hairline, you'll feel a ridge of bone. And that's your pubic crest. Okay? So now I'm going to try to find it on my partner. Can I locate your pubic crest? Okay. So ask permission. So there's his umbilicus. And there we just sort of press into the fibers of the rectus. And right about there, there's the ridge of his pubic crest. If you do a little crunch again, great. And there I can really feel the tendon of the rectus abdominis attached right there. Good. Go ahead and relax. And it gives you an idea of how the rectus abdominis sort of tapers as it comes down the abdomen like so. So now that the belly's relaxed, I'm just going to sort of work my finger.
Yeah, we don't work our fingers either. But you know that, right? Where does it say I can eject it? Right there.
There.
Okay. Yeah, we had some people that come in and do these different little lectures and talks to them, and if they bring their own discs, and some of them that I've bought, the resolution isn't. The resolution isn't right, and if it slows down, then put it in the machine.
In there. Okay. I will practice with it.
Okie dokie. I gave you a handout for the muscle structure. And what we're looking at when we look at a muscle, I hate this. You have to hit like the copier. You got to hit the button and slide it. You can't just tap it and it'll stop. You got to hit it and slide it. And half the time it won't turn on because you didn't slide it just right.
So you missed a call.
Well, that's
or something.
Something wrong, obviously.
But I want to turn it off, and I'm
Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed what you're talking about. It's gotten very touchy because it is
using
very
my elbow
touchy.
at one point, and I hardly ever use my elbow.
Yeah.
Really, on the copier, get it.
And then other times,
on Thursday.
you have to do that. It's just really,
So they're getting new machines?
Getting new
They
machines.
are long overdue, maybe by this time next year?
yeah. Well, they say
Really?
this month, but you know how that goes. But it's supposed to be this month.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Then we, it's much easier.
The one that, you know where the one is in the hallway at the end of the hall? Okay, I'll have to show you where that one is. They usually turn that, the only one that works really good, they turn off. Yeah.
On the first floor?
Yeah, yeah, it's down the hall from the copier machine. Yeah, I'll have to show you. Okay. So, let's look at this one first. Now, I gave you both. This is going to be your quiz for next week. Okay, but it's going to be labeling it with this. With this, all right? So the structure of the muscle, if you want to know how it works, you have to know what is in there. So you look at the whole thing. So number 10 is the entire muscle, the whole thing, okay? Now when you pull it out, inside it kind of looks like a telephone wire. You cut it open, and there's little bundles of different wires inside the big wire, surrounded by insulation. And what is the insulation in the body?
Fat.
Connective tissue. Now, what kind of connective tissue do you think the membranes are made of?
What kind of connective tissue is the membrane made of?
Smooth, not dense. It'd be smooth, no.
You only have one place where you got smooth. You don't have smooth connective tissue.
Tissue, no. Dense.
You have superficial and dense, and yeah,
Cardiac.
yeah. Areolar is your packing material, connective tissue, but it's not as thick as this. This is dense irregular. Irregular, because it stretches in all different directions, yeah. So inside it, you've got little bundles, and the bundles are called fascicles. Now, when you look at that chart back there, you look at the muscles, it's not like a smooth red surface, is it? There are little lines. Now, most people make the mistake of thinking those are fibers. You can't see fibers, they're microscopic. So what are those bundles you're looking at? Fascicles. That's what you're looking at, fascicles, okay?
So they create that.
They create that look because they're wrapped in connective tissue. Now, inside each fascicle, there are bundles of fibers. So each layer has its own membrane, its own wrapping. We go endomycelium, perimycelium, and epimycelium, okay? And inside the fiber is made up of myofibrils. What are myofibrils? Fibrils are just sarcomeres all lined up, okay? Remember, we don't say myocyte because it's not one cell. It's a bunch of cells fused together, so we call it a fiber. It can be very long. You can imagine how long it is for the quads. It's pretty long, right? Really long muscle. So that fiber is pretty long. It could be 2 or 3 feet long. They're really big. But inside, it's just sarcomere, 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 sarcomere. Now, the thing about sarcomeres is they don't go from one cell and stop. The sarcomeres are what kind of connect the whole thing into a fiber. So those organelles go the entire length of the fiber. Now, when you exercise, okay, it always takes resistance to increase strength. All right? But the muscle doesn't get bigger. The sarcomeres, you get more sarcomeres, all right? So you might start off with a couple of hundred and you start building and you become Arnold Schwarzenegger and you've got like 2,000. Then when you stop exercising, you lose the sarcomeres, right?
Luckily it has
Muscles
memory.
atrophy. What was that?
But luckily muscle has memory. What I was gonna
Not the
ask-
muscle itself. That's in what part of the brain, by the way? If you read your brain top to bottom, where are muscle patterns remembered? Got to read your handouts. What?
So if the sarcomeres were not continuous and lined up like that, then there wouldn't be fibers.
Well, the thing is, it's called all or none. All right? When you contract, when contraction takes place, the entire myofilament shortens. Not just this section or that section. It doesn't stop. It's the whole thing. It doesn't contract at all or the whole thing contracts. Now, how you gauge how much force you use is how many sarcomeres do you contract at one time. I don't need as many sarcomeres for this as I do for this. But it wasn't half a sarcomere. It was the whole thing, but just fewer of
How
them.
many were engaged?
Yeah, how many of them were engaged, okay? And those are called fibrils, okay? You line them up, they're called fibrils. Now, inside the sarcomere, it is made up of filaments. Filaments, all right? And you got two. What are they?
Or actin and
Actin and myosin. Now, these contractile protein fibers you find in other places of the body because they're able to open and close things and pull things along. Remember, well, I haven't shown it to you, but inside the cell you have these little motor proteins, these little actin fibers, and they're the ones that carry the vesicles from where they're excreted to the surface of the cell and let them go. Or when something comes into the cell, they pick it up and they carry it to wherever it's going on little collagen fibers, the cytoskeleton. It acts like a highway. I have to show you that. A thing that you can research is called the Howard Hughes Institute. He set up a foundation for medical studies, and they do a lot of stuff that's free. You can get on their newsletter, and if things come out that you want, like a CD or something. I get a lot of stuff from my grandkids. You can get for different subjects, but a lot of it's anatomy. And they gave these Harvard guys a bunch of money to do this video on what's actually taking place in a cell. What does it really look like on a molecular level? And they kind of like tried to gauge the speed of how things actually, like 35 to 1, so you can actually see what's happening. And it's just an amazing, very fast, all these different things doing all this different stuff at once. It's really, really neat, but it's a good one to watch. But the filaments are made up of the actin and myosin. Now, why does it look light and dark here? Right there, why is it just like one color? Why is it light and dark? Anybody look at the muscle system in the innerbody.com? You're supposed to look all that stuff up. Those are called Z lines, the darker bands. So you can tell the start and the stop of a sarcomere because it has these different structures. And that's why it's called striated when you look at it under a microscope, because those dark bands make it look light and dark, like there's striations in it. That's where it gets its name. Yep. Now, and remember, the myosin is in the middle, and it's the thicker one. Now, what actually happens, you see those little things sticking off the myosin? All right, remember your body uses free energy whenever it can, and polarity is the best free energy you got. Because what happens if you got a plus and a minus? It'll attract. So, when there's no current or there's no change in polarity, the little molecule on the actin is twisted. But when the calcium is released, it changes the polarity, and that untwists. Now you've got a positive and a negative, and the little myosin is attracted to the actin, and it acts like those boats that you scull in, those long boats like this, right? And everybody's got oars to row with, and there's a little thing on the end, and when there's a charge, this is pulled up there, and they row. They go like this. And they all work together. And this shoots forward, and the contraction takes place. Now, instantaneously, enzymes go to work, and other things happen. The polarity is released, and all that calcium is either neutralized or pulled back up where? Where is the calcium stored? Now, remember, whenever we talk about anything in the body, it's the cell because that's where life takes place. So it's got to be an organelle, right? It's got to be an organelle. So which one is it? Sarcoplasmic reticulum. So their reticulum is a little special than the other cells, right? What is the endoplasmic reticulum doing in a cell? What's their job?
Transportation. Transport.
They're producing something, right? They're creating something. And if you have a little RNA in the ribosomes, it's making protein. So what's the smooth doing?
Oh, the lipids.
It's making lipids and some carbs, yeah. Now, when it's produced and you're not going to use it right away, where does it get stored?
Fat.
That's not an organelle. Where does it get stored?
Mitochondria?
No. Very Golgi apparatus. Now, it's just like a UPS store. If you take something to the UPS store, can you just hand it to them? Like, here's my bike. Ship it to California. What do you got to do? You got to put it in a box, right? And you got to put the stuff in there. So the Golgi packages it and stores it until it's ready to use it. Because it doesn't want to be used up. It doesn't want to interact. It needs to keep it preserved. Okay? So it gets ready to use it. If it's going to be used inside, it doesn't really have to be put in a vesicle. But if it's going to be taken outside, it's put in a vesicle. Your little actin motor proteins come along and carry it up to the surface. And why is it called? What's the process called when things are taken and put out of the cell? Exocytosis. What's it called when it's brought into the cell?
Endocytosis.
Endocytosis. Now, inside, there's two things it's going to do. Either it's going to be a solid or a liquid. So if it's a solid, what's it called? Phagocytosis. What's it? A liquid? Pinocytosis. See, everything is organized. You can have a general term, but sometimes they break down into differences within that term. It really doesn't matter when it's leaving. It's in a vesicle, no matter what it is. But when things are coming in, it's going to do it two ways. It's either solid or it's liquid. But both of them are called endocytosis. You're eating something, right? Okay. So you got to remember all this crap, all right? Sorry, you do. So an actin and a myosin, that's a sarcomere. Sarcomere, 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 it's a myofilament. Inside the cell is the myofibrils made up of the filaments bundled in the fascicles that make the muscle. So you got 4 F's. So remember, you got 4 F's. You got a fascicle, then what have you got? You got a fiber, then you got a fascicle, then you got a myofibril, then you got a filament. And then the whole thing is a muscle, right? Now, is any of those little membranes separate from all the other membranes? No. Even into the cell, the cytoskeleton is the same thing, and it's connected to everything outside the cell, too. It's amazing, isn't it? That crap is everywhere.
The human body.
It is, the more you learn, to me, the more I learn, the more fascinating it is, the more I want to learn. And every time you take a new class, you think, God, I didn't really know anything from before. It can get really complicated. Now, have you gone online and looked at the website, The Brain from Top to Bottom, where I got that excerpt for you from? You should go on there and look at it. It's an excellent website. Teaches you everything about the muscle. About the nervous system. The Brain from Top to Bottom.com. It's from some university. I forget which one it is. But it's really good. The way it's laid out is really, really good, too. Okay, now, we are going to do a quiz. Now, the reason I gave you your muscle list again is because it's for the quiz. So you're lucky you're getting a muscle list to go with your quiz. That only happens the first time I give a quiz. You'll do it again, but without the list.
Okay, I think
Okay.
we're learning now.
All right. Now, the first thing is only the ones with numbers. Some of the pictures have numbers, some of them don't. Now, if you know what the other ones are, you can try to answer them, but you don't have to. All right. Now, how you do this is the first thing you look at, is that an anterior view, a posterior view, or a lateral view? That'll tell you a little something, right? Now, on the thumb, if it's a flexor, remember that the thumb flexes like that. So where are you going to find those flexors? You're not going to find them in front. You're going to find them right there, right? All right, and that's abduction, so where are you going to find an abductor? It's going to be here, right? And an extensor? So if I'm looking at a posterior view, I'm not looking at a flexor. I'm not looking at an abductor. I'm looking at extensors, right? Yeah. Now the wrist is an exception, there always are, because in the wrist you also have this action, deviation. Now the one good thing about all these little muscles is they have the action in their name. There's only one muscle in the arm that doesn't tell you the action, but it says palmaris in its name. So if you're on the palm, you know it's a flexor, right, for the wrist. Everything else tells you flexor, extensor, okay? But to do this, all right, you have an extensor and a flexor pulling together to do, what's that? Radial deviation or abduction. I hate that because it's not very accurate. And then over here, you're going to have a flexor and you're going to have an extensor. Over here, it's going to be what? Over here, it's a radialis. Over here, it's a ulnaris, right? It's moving the wrist, so what do you think is going to be in their name? Carpi. You want to see a big word or you want to see a bunch of words? Because the more information you got, the more you know the definition. That's why we use Latin, because it's descriptive. It tells you. The word is the definition. So if I have a flexor carpi ulnaris, where am I going to look for it? Anterior view, this side of the picture, right? And if I'm looking at an extensor carpi ulnaris, posterior view, this side of the wrist. Okay? That's, yeah. But everything else is pretty straightforward. So if you look at it, look first for if it's anterior, posterior, lateral, whatever. But the trunk ones are pretty simple. You either got the stomach, the chest, or the back. There's nothing subtle about that. Okay, nothing subtle at all. And then sometimes you have to kind of know what you're looking at. So between the external oblique and the internal oblique, the first thing I look for, and this is kind of hard to see, but you can see it, what direction of the fibers? All right, which one of those two muscles goes down and in?
External. That's what we said,
Down
number one.
It's if you put your hands in your pockets, that's the external. You're going down and in.
Down and in.
It comes up higher. It comes all the way up to here. The internal is doing the opposite. It's going down and in. When I say in, what do I mean? What's it going to?
Right.
Down and into what? What's the insertion for these muscles? The linea alba. And what is the linea alba? It's a ligament. It goes from the xiphoid process to the ramus of the pubic bone. And it's an attachment site for your abdominal muscles, okay? Right down the middle. You can see it up there, kind of, sort of. They cut it away, but you can see it. All right? It's there. Now, I don't know if you guys got to the scapular muscles or not yet. Did you? Kind of, sort of? All right.
That was next on our list.
Yeah. But some of them, like number 2, I'll go ahead and tell you that one, because we've already talked about this. If it's below the spine and it's in the fossa there, it's called the infraspinatus muscle, okay?
Can we start writing on this?
No, don't write on that. That's your quiz. We're going to start doing it. And if I've got an infraspinatus, what do I have? I got a supraspinatus.
That's on the other side.
No, it's above. Supra means above, infra means below.
With the sub.
And then if it's a sub, it's underneath. Yeah. So I've got a supraspinatus, an infraspinatus, and a subscapularis. I have those 3 muscles, okay?
Teres minor is the one on top.
The little mnemonic for that is the minor always sits higher than the major. And what they're talking about is the insertion point, okay? The insertion point. Usually it's also a higher muscle, but the insertion is more, if it's on the body, it's superior. If it's on the arm and leg, it is more proximal. Those two terms mean the same thing, but when we're talking about the limbs, we don't say superior and inferior, we say proximal and distal. But they mean the same thing. Proximal is going to be above distal. Superior is above inferior, okay? So if you're not real sure about the shoulder ones, it's okay. But try just to answer the ones that are numbered, like I said, and if you want to do the other ones, you can, the hand ones and the arm ones.
Red on now or no?
Yeah, so put all your stuff away. You can leave your muscle list out and your quiz. Muscle list and quiz. And we're going to give you your study guide tomorrow for the midterm for the A&P. Everything is always multiple choice on your midterm, so. And by the time you do all these quizzes, and then you should be doing just fine. I try to keep them to 100 questions all the time, but sometimes they're less. I'll record them.
So we can just write next to the number, is that okay?
Yeah, put everything away, guys. Put everything away. Okay. And then what you can do is just label the picture. Label the picture. Write the name on there. Okay. Don't forget your name. Put it on top. Now, on some of them, they're like groups, like number 12. If you don't remember all separate parts to it, at least tell me what group that is. Tell me what group you're looking at.